Welcome back to Get to Know a World of Warships Clan, a short podcast hosted by Bogsy and Synpax, produced by TNG, the new guys. I, of course, am Bogsy. I'm here with Synpax. I'm here with the guest host, The Storm from TNG. Hello, fellas. How are you?
How's it going, Bogsy?
It's going fine.
Yeah. I heard there was a mutiny over the weekend and you got somebody to replace me. And I just want you to know there are no hard feelings.
It's true. I did get someone to replace you, although nobody can truly replace the feeling in my heart that your soft, silky, smooth voice gives me. So I want you to know that it'll always be that.
Yeah, I hear the words you're saying, but I'm not feeling them.
Well, I told you I'm an actor, but I never said I was a good actor. So.
Yeah, I didn't either. So I think we should let's get straight on,
All right.
and quit wasting time because we have a very serious deal, a very big guest with us today that we're very happy to have on our podcast. I would like to introduce. It's a little bit like Prince, right? That only needs that one name. Femennenly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you guys. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. We're going to get right into some stuff here because I'm going to be leaving after the first segment so I can go to work and earn my salt. But if you don't mind, I guess what I'd like to ask you, first of all, is the most important thing, Russian bias, real or fake news?
It's a lot of people are definitely biased towards Russian bias.
I'm sorry, that wasn't a real question. That was a joke. Well, so obviously, I'm the new guy on this podcast, really, in the sense that I've only been in the community for about 2 years. I've only been playing, about 6,000 battles, something like that. So sometimes when we have really important people like you on, I oftentimes don't know why. I do know who you are, and I know why we have you here, obviously. But for anyone listening who might be an idiot like me, you were the NA community manager for Wargaming, correct?
Close enough. I was the NA community coordinator. From June 2018 until March 2020.
Okay, very nice. And which meant essentially that you were sort of in control over the community contributors and how Wargaming interacted with the NA community, right?
Yeah, pretty much. The role isn't too dissimilar to what a community manager does.
Okay, I gotcha. Wonderful. Well, let's see here. We've got so many things to ask you about. I think I'm going to just start with a question about how the company does balancing, if you don't mind. I'm kind of curious to know your opinion on how the company balances randoms versus clan battles, because it's obviously been a hot button topic over the last couple, I would say, weeks, maybe a month or so, about whether or not they cater towards the more optimized gameplay or whether it's for the randoms.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just kind of give myself a little bit of a blanket kind of disclaimer in terms of it has been a little bit since I was with Wargaming, so my knowledge of internal bits and pieces is a little bit outdated now. And this is just my experience and what my opinion is of what I've kind of witnessed. But in terms of balance, my understanding, or from what I witnessed, it does seem that ships are predominantly balanced against one another. They do this just because with how ships are developed, you can put a Unicum player in a ship and they'd be absolutely amazing at it. But at the same time, put a average or a below average player in that same ship and they do terribly. And you can't really balance a ship for one degree of player because otherwise it makes it either super overpowered or super unusable for the other end of the spectrum, depending how you're looking on it. So ships are predominantly balanced within the same tier and within the same class, if you will. So like a Moskva and a Venezia are going to be balanced kind of with looking at them and the other tier 10 cruisers. When it comes to how do they balance for modes, it is predominantly, to my understanding, done with more random battles in mind, since that is what caters to the majority of the player base. The other factor to consider that is there is some, outside liars where that's not the case, such as, let's say, like the legendary commander traits not necessarily activating in in clan battles. So there is some discrepancy, but majority of balancing, I believe, is done with interships and with randoms in mind.
Okay. And I guess I'm also kind of curious to know what triggers a look at something that might be considered overpowered or underperforming, is it just spreadsheet, or is there sort of like is it just digital, or is there like an analog voice that comes in and says, hey, this feels like it's not working correctly?
So it's both. It's no surprise the development team does look at a lot at the spreadsheets. That is where all the data comes from. But it is a key function of the community teams on a weekly basis to prepare reports to go to the development teams that highlight poor sentiment. So, for example, back in the day, if we were seeing like a lot of sentiment around, a particular ship either overperforming, underperforming, we would detail that sentiment and present that to the development team, who would then use the information that we've given them and cross-correlate that with spreadsheet data to determine, is it just a feeling that is not really represented throughout the community? Is it a certain subset of the community that is feeling it? Or is it actually a problem?
I see. And I mean, considering that your job was more about, about that community, what was the most effective way in your tenure? What was the most effective way for the community to sort of let you know what they felt about something like that? What was the way that was the most constructive and helpful and actually got someone to look at it?
I was going to say the most effective way of conveying that feedback would have been constructively. The amount of times that I read threads on the forums or threads on Reddit saying, this ship is broken, I hate it, Wargaming, go die. Not very constructive. But when we saw threads that were well constructed, hey, I'm having a problem with this ship, I'm running into this experience, I'm getting smacked left, right, and center, or I feel like no matter what I hit on this ship, I can't penetrate it. Those sorts of feedbacks were the most important because it actually allowed us to very quickly work out and know what sort of stats and what sort of areas to look at regarding whatever ship it was about. But the I hate this ship, Wargaming, go die was the worst feedback that the community could give us.
So CV's bad lol is not really a constructive way to get something. Oh, okay. Well,
funnily enough,
I have one specific thing that I'm really glad I get to ask you about, because I remember, and then I'll give it to Synpax to ask real questions again. But I remember seeing the trailer that Wargaming put out that coined the very famous phrase, "the thinking man's action game." And I remember watching it and seeing, as it was saying the thinking man's action game, there is a CV dropping torpedoes like way too late, to the point where they won't arm before they hit this battleship. And it was such perfect irony to me. And I'm just wondering, did someone get fired over that?
I don't actually know the trailer that you're referring to, but I highly doubt it.
It was delightful. It was it was just the carrier's dropping, and it's literally so late that the torpedoes aren't even going to arm right as the narrator is saying, "World of Warships, the thinking man's action game," in that wonderful voice that I'm sure they paid someone well to do.
Maybe that was just an Easter egg for the Unicum players out there to
go back
and enjoy.
All right, well, that's it for me for right now. While I think of some more, Synpax, go for it.
Yeah, so I want to set this up a little bit. You went through a Herculean task this weekend where you basically did 7 hours on stream answering questions about working for Wargaming while playing the game, and playing it pretty well. Like, the guys know I can barely talk and play at the same time. I can barely play at all. But for you to spend your Saturday and Sunday mornings just grinding away and answering many of the questions that I'm quite sure I've heard asked before and answered, but doing it completely politely, never losing your temper. I think it really demonstrates you've got the chops for community manager, and and I wanted to follow up on some of those, some of the things you said during that, because there's a lot of depth, but it wasn't maybe the best forum for like getting under the surface of some of the questions that folks were asking.
For sure.
So one of the things you said that really made me wonder, just the anthropologist in me, you said that the NA team was often trying to get Wargaming to adapt to what you described as quote unquote regional differences. And I'm really curious, what are the regional differences?
Yeah, so this came down majority of the time down to communication styles. One thing that's very, very prevalent in North America is North Americans are very privileged to have high levels of customer service coming from American companies. You think Amazon, if you have a problem with an order, you're going to get a response very quickly. They'll send you out a new one if it gets damaged on the way. And it is all quick and it's all extremely polite. In comparison to some European cultures and even the Russian culture, you don't get that sort of level of customer service or kind of level of almost sickeningly sweet politeness, as it were. And that was something we tried to explain, that how you communicate to different audiences is really important. And I think a great example of this was the Puerto Rico messaging that came out around Christmas time when Sub Octavian came back with a response and it wasn't received the best way. And while looking at that and knowing kind of how the Russian developers speak, it's like I could have said that in a much more kind of eloquently phrased way that probably would have been accepted a lot better. And it just comes down to those kind of cultural differences and understanding of English and conveyance, that we saw a lot of the time that while we understood what they were trying to convey, the way that they were saying it in North American cultures or kind of North American expectations came across extremely rude or just not understanding.
Right. I've spent some time in some heavily Russian influenced cultures, and a simple comparison I can think of is that here in the United States, when you buy a mattress, and there's a tremendous number of these online mattress sellers, right? They'll send you the mattress, and you'll have like 120 days to try it out. And if you don't like it, well, you can ship it back for free, no problem. You try that in one of these Russian, you can't even return it after one day. There's
Yeah.
just not that, and if you even suggested that to the clerk, the look they would give you.
Yeah, and it essentially just comes down to that. It's nothing wrong with the fact that there is cultural differences. It's just the fact that there is, and they just need to be slightly tailored towards, how you address the different audiences.
Yeah, and you know what? I can honestly, in Wargaming's favor, because I get the sense, especially from watching you handle all of those questions yesterday, that almost every question kind of came at Wargaming in an angle of attack, either just at least slightly antagonistic. Everything was predicated with the idea that Wargaming, there's something wrong with that company. I mean, I think everybody just needs to have an awareness, though, when you get it, you start playing World of Warships. This is fundamentally a Russian company, and it's got Russian sensibilities. And I think that, at least on our side, we should be a little bit aware. And you know what? That has some advantages too, that I can tell. But obviously there's some disadvantages.
Yeah, no, it is definitely one of those things. It would be nice if that understanding goes two ways in terms of, yes, our developers need to be a kind of a little bit more quote unquote friendly, but at the same time, us as Americans need to understand that, the culturally is different. It does go both ways. Unfortunately for wargaming, the fact that we are the consumers means that they need to be slightly more understanding towards us than we towards them, sort of thing, unfortunately.
Right. And my approach to this game, I think, is similar to many people may not be cognizant of this, but logging in to play World of Warships is not really different in terms of the expectations and experience than walking into any casino in North America, be it in Las Vegas or many, they're spread out all over the country on reservations, that kind of thing. But when you walk into one of those places, with the biofeedback you get from the lights and the sounds and the experience is identical to what I think draws many people to World of Warships, especially considering the age demographic. And also, when you walk, you will never get better customer service anywhere in the world than you will in a casino, particularly the ones that are North America, because they understand that, and so I think that, I don't know. I don't. Do you think that Wargaming looks at this game and recognizes that they are in fact running a relatively, a high, like, do they look at this game as something like the Bellagio or the Wynn, or do they see it maybe something differently where you kind of you take it and either take it or leave it,
I'm really not sure. It in some areas it feels like they are really high end, but in other areas it feels like they've really just kind of flopped over. It's kind of like you've kept one end of the pool really clean and the other end has mildew and gunk kind of forming on it. So it really depends what area that you're looking at. For example, like I actually think wargaming customer support, and I know, if you have a difficult case or, your case falls outside the speculations, like you are going to get pissed off that they can't do what you want them to do. But as a whole, like the turnaround on responses is really quick. And the fact that, they will reissue ships if you've accidentally sold them, those sorts of things, a lot of companies wouldn't do. So I think like the customer service is really, really good. But in some areas, it just falls flat. Like, some of the communications, some of the phraseology in the kind of like patch notes where it's kind of confusing and you don't necessarily always get the information you expect to see.
Right, and I can definitely vouch for at least customer service. I mean, there have been everybody that I've seen has really complained about customer service has done so from a point of view where they're asking customer service to do something that that logically they cannot do, right?
Yeah, logically or legally, like there's a
Right.
reason why it can't be done. Yeah.
Right, but I've had incidences where I bought like a $100 package during the Steel Monster thing, and instead I meant to get the $140 package. So they went through and reversed the entire transaction, like everything, so I could just basically. It was not. I know it was not easy on their end to do that. So, overall, port reverses. I've never been to a casino where if I put it on black and it comes up red, they let me get my money back. So it's
Oh,
really.
I don't think those casinos would stay in business very long.
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. But I definitely get that concierge level feeling a lot of times from customer service, and it doesn't go unnoticed. But you are right that the thing is, and part of this is something you probably are better aware of than anyone, is that customer service responses are done by customer service people. Customer service people know how to talk to customers. Developers, lead designers, once they wade into the areas of communication and corporate relations with the public, that's not really a skill set that they were ever really hired to have, was it?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, after a certain level, you do need to kind of be well-rounded, have the ability to talk to the players, as well as do kind of your developmental kind of obligations as well. But you have regional community teams, one for each server, who your community managers are kind of trained up in communicating in the correct and effective way. Now, we do get it wrong sometimes. I know I've definitely put my foot in my mouth once or twice. But as a whole, you have these teams that are kind of designed to be those front-facing aspects to your community. Utilize them, explain what you want to communicate, and let your community teams do what ultimately they're hired for. That was one thing that was extremely frustrating. Was we'd see the developers put out conversations, and then we'd essentially have to go into damage control in terms of reinterpreting what they actually meant to say and cleaning it up and trying to essentially put out fires.
Right. But I think that also, though, there's got to be some allowance for the audience has to understand something. Hey, no, every gamer that's really invested in a game, like they are with World of Warships, they really want to talk to the developers. They really want to talk to the designers, the people who are making the decisions. We like, the community manager types. Sure, you're real cool and all that, but we really want to talk to the guys that are making the decisions, writing the code. But we also have to understand that, hey, they're not going to have a silver tongue. And I think there just needs to be some forgiveness for that, because you can't insist on talking to people whom you really want to talk to with these skill sets and then get angry at them when they don't, give you, butter your biscuit just the way you expect it. So I want to move on from that subject a little bit. Boggsy asked about balance, and actually, we're going to go to a quick break. Boggsy, I'm going to throw the ball to you.
Sure. Yeah. So as I said before, unfortunately I have to leave and I have to go to work. I'm a bartender and I make my money by poisoning people. And if I do it with a smile, they give me more. I love it. But I wanted to say, Femennenly, thank you very much for coming on. Obviously, I won't be here for the second segment, but we really appreciate you coming. I wish that I had a little more time. I would have loved to ask you some questions about your stream and about your career as a streamer, because obviously you've done an incredible job with that. But thank you very much for coming. And are we doing Sink of Ships impacts?
I guess I'll do it after the subsequent break with the hard one.
Okay. Well, I'm taking off, but thank you so much for coming by and giving us your time.
Of course, Bugsy. Yeah, have a great day poisoning people.
I will. Thank you. Bye, guys.
And we'll take a short break and we'll come right back. and this is Syntax, and I am back with Femennenly, and we're going to talk wargaming stuff. We're going to talk shop. So Bogsy in the previous segment asked you a little bit about balance, and I've sort of noticed something with some of these ships coming out, where it seems like wargaming is releasing ships that have a high skill floor. So that they're not necessarily going to balance. If you try to take a ship, and let's take the Des Moines, right? It balances against the other ships of its class in the hands of strong players, medium players, and let's call them casual players, right? It's going to be somewhat consistent, but there are some new ships and ship lines that have been coming out that scream to me that the more casual players and those who are closer to the middle of the road are going to really struggle with this ship, and then they're not going to stop playing it. So the only people left playing it who didn't get frustrated overwhelmingly, 90%, not 100%, but 90% are going to be the extremely skilled players. And if they try to balance that in such a way that it matches the performance of, say, the rest of the ships in the class, they'll have to basically break it. And I'm thinking about a lot of the EU pan-European smokeless DDs. Any destroyer without a smoke is automatically going to be something that mid-level players and casual players are going to maybe not, if they've got an hour to play that day, they don't want to die in 3 minutes, right? Or the new Kitakami, which is, has a lot of potential, but that thing's going to get wrecked real fast if somebody doesn't know what they're doing in it. So I was wondering if that, if they're going to be, I don't know, if that's going to change their approach to balance, or if this is an intentional thing to just throw a few ships in there that they know that mid-level and casual players are going to struggle with, but if you really invest the time to get good at this game, you're going to play it like a Stradivarius.
It's hard to say definitively. I think, they can't keep creating the same ships over and over again. Otherwise, you're going to lose audience interest in that. While newer or your more average players may struggle with some of the, let's say, more gimmicky style ships, which, let's be honest, some of these ones that you're mentioning are in terms of, or, your non-conventional DDs without smoke. While yes, your newer kind of or more average players will struggle with them, you do need to make sure that you are maintaining interest of your audience that's been around the block or, been around the map a few times with more interesting and diverse ships. Because again, no one wants to play the same ship time and time again. What will that mean for balance? It's really hard to say. So thinking about it, the first real line that was kind of different was probably you're looking at your Italian cruisers and your European DDs with the SAP and then the no smoke. Even now, yes, the people who had been around the block a few times playing them did better in them. Now they are in a position where they can be tweaked slightly as we see more and more people picking them up and trying them. I think, yes, they're definitely not designed for your newer or your average players. They are, that special sauce for the older or more unicorn players to keep the game interesting for them. How they will go about balance them long term, I mean, I think it will be a case of tweaks and tweaks and tweaks until they kind of get them as they are getting picked up more and more. But I also feel like, we've seen it with Stalingrad back in the day. It was really, really, it appeared really, really strong to begin with, but you did have it in the hands of the unicorn players. And as steel has become more accessible and more people have collected it, those stats are starting to reduce as it is becoming more in the hands of everyone. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's hard to balance though, because like I said, we have historically, and we've seen it in Wargaming's own dialogue with the players when they occasionally pull the curtain back a little bit and show, well, this is why we're rebalancing this. You saw they went pretty deep into the weeds talking about what drove their choices with the legendary upgrade adjustments. But there are just going to be ships out there that can't be balanced around the entire player pool. But the way I kind of see it is that like releasing these ships that have a very high skill floor is just a next level of end game development, right? Because
yeah,
well, and that doesn't fit necessarily with the paradigm of balancing every ship across its entire class, across all skill levels of players. So it just makes me optimistic. And speaking of balance, I'm sure you got lots of feedback anytime a ship was nerfed or buffed. And there's been a trend I've noticed, in that in the past, buffs and nerfs were often done with a sledgehammer. The most notable, to me at least, was the Yu Yang nerf, which they've gradually been pulling back. However, recently I've seen the nerfs, things like to the Jutland or the Daring, are these like micro nerfs of just a slight reduction in DPM, and they didn't do those like barely perceive. Basically, they're a nerf that if you were playing the ship, you'd be really hard set to even notice it, right? Was that the result of feedback on this old sledgehammer method, and do you think that's progress?
Yeah, that was definitely feedback from what happened back in the day with the old balancing techniques, where essentially what would happen is you'd sledgehammer something, you'd see how it go, and then you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell directly what, like, you'd have too many knock-on effects, so you couldn't work out exactly, what needed to be retweaked. So the benefit of doing it little by little now is that you can actually see the cause and effect quite a lot more clearer, and it actually makes balancing occur faster and more accurately. So yes, that was a result of the Yu Yang sledgehammering.
Right. I mean, it's because there's, let's say, knock-on effect. Is that after that happened, I didn't touch my Yu Yang again. I seem to recall having something north of a 60% win rate in it in the past, and you rarely ever even see them anymore. So you couldn't even get a good measurement at the time whether it was because obviously super testing, and you got the special server, but the scale of testing and the difference between what you learn from watching what happens there versus what happens on an entire server, it's got to be huge. I guess there's one thing that you said that, and this is sort of the last of the balance questions. I understand. We really want to focus more on some community-oriented stuff, but this is sort of a balance question, and it's kind of my own, I guess, little pet peeve thing, is that you said that players can't balance ships.
Yes.
And they can't balance ships. Not, well, as a whole, they can't. But also, I don't think really any player can balance ships because they don't have information. However, you also said that information would be misconstrued if Wargaming released it. However, Wargaming does release information that by design can only be misconstrued through the API and websites like WOWS stats and MapleServe, as good as they do to try to make, set up a ceteris paribus situation, and this is, I think, causes so much furor in the community. The loudest, and then you have community contributors who have very loud voices who, for some reason, can't understand data nearly as well as they understand, how to play a ship well. The best example, I think, was when the Conqueror came out. And the Conqueror had like an insane level of damage if you looked at the WOWS numbers page. This was based on data that Wargaming was providing through their API. However, there are a couple things happening there that if you had the complete picture, you'd certainly be able to see that, well, it's not that overpowered. It's, and you had people raging on the forums about the Conqueror when it came out. And basically two things were happening. Number one is that the first people to always get every ship are usually is very different from the player pool as a whole skill-wise. They're always going to be much better. That's why almost every new ship that comes out has really great numbers, because the people who get it first, especially if it's a tech tree ship, are those that have the most invested in the game. They're not noobs. And there are also folks who are trying to, there's a leaderboard on the third-party website. They want to be number one on it or whatever. It's very competitive. So extreme. And, other factors that, Conqueror, when you look at the average damage numbers, a lot of that damage is fires. And a lot of that is healable. It's not the same as, say, maybe a Yamato does 20% less damage, but that's Citadels, and it's not healing, or healing nearly as much. So I've always puzzled why they're not more transparent with the data, especially since they're giving out data that is inherently biased in a way that causes confusion.
So you have to remember that while yes, the API can be pulled from, that is not Wargaming necessarily giving information per se. The same, if someone was really dedicated to, they could pull all the replays and get the damage numbers for ships that way. It's essentially speeding up that process. But there is a lot of numbers that are internal that are definitely not shared because they can be misconstrued. for example, you say the average damage, and if we were to say give out the average damage, or sorry, if Wargaming was to say give out the average damage tables for all ships, someone might look at that and say, oh, look at that ship, ship A, it's got 200,000 average damage, and say that needs to be nerfed. And then if you were to go further and say that we released it for all stats that are naturally tracked within Wargaming, the amount of kind of, the meme of the guy with the string going around all the different images and kind of conspiracy theory-esque, it would end up coming back like that, and the information would just get so convoluted and so many tin hat foil situations that,
Well,
that is why it's not done. I'm not saying that there isn't room to do that in some situations, and I think the conversations they've had where they have shown more information and tried to explain the information and done that have been really, really good. But unfortunately, there just isn't the staff power within the balancing and the development team to sit there and write out kind of, this is how you can interpret this data and this is what this data means. While average damage might mean one thing, and that one's a pretty obvious, what about, another particular metric that has a weird title that you may, like, the players might perceive it as one thing, but it actually means something completely different.
I hear you. And your example of, say, releasing a sheet of average damage, well, that in fact doesn't actually release the complete information. And that number itself could be discerned from API to some extent. But is to see, I've tried to do the analysis myself where I'll pull like 50 or 100 top players that I know, and because they're the best at exploiting ships if they're strong or avoiding if they're weak, and then seeing how the average damage is among, say, the top 100 players, and I do that by hand through WOW numbers or these other third-party sites. So I think the thing is that the people who shape opinion and there are certain voices in this community who have the ability to make a whole lot of other people unhappy because they say something and everybody else kind of takes it as gospel. Is if those people at the top, these opinion leaders, I'll use that word, had the level of spreadsheet access so that they could actually see, hey, the Conqueror's just, this is what's actually happening. It's really fire damage. It's really just the top 15% of players, and among the top 15% of players, Conqueror does the same damage that they get in all their other battleships, or some over the last 2 weeks. All I'm saying is that if Wargaming was a little bit more transparent, or maybe had like some level of access for those opinion leaders, the community's managers would have a lot less fires and flames to deal with. The pitchforks would come out a little less often. But you answered that question splendidly, and I'm just kind of rambling now. But speaking of community responses, the community's complained about a lot of things, and sometimes they get mobilized.
Boy, have they.
Yeah, sometimes from time to time I've heard this happen. And from my perspective, I have my own judgment. I think most of the times they get upset about things are just they're just wrong, basically. And I tend to agree with Wargaming's. They have a certain way of looking at things in terms of the game as a whole, holistically and long term. I understand what they're doing. But there was one case where the community did rise up. The pitchforks and torches did come out. And from the outside, it actually looked like Wargaming blinked. And that was NTC. Now, for those listening, Naval Training Center, in a nutshell, was a proposed system similar to what Naval Research Bureau is now. Right, somewhat similar in the way that you would reset lines, but what you would do with those reset line Research Bureau points is instead of unlocking side grades or maybe unlocking a new ship, these would become instead progressive and permanent upgrades to ships that would not be side grades, but straight up substantial upgrades that would take Wargaming. I think World of Warships is primarily a game of skill, and shift it more in the direction of being something like Eve. So if you've got a super upgraded Yamato, you're just going to, it's a very
You're
hard
going to wail
thing
on the baby Yamatos.
Right, it's going to be the skill. Basically, it's I don't know how to say it any other different. Just imagine your soccer team has 12 players and the other one has 8, and you can't really skill your way out of that. And that, I'm not criticizing it in my description. I'm just saying it was shifting what kind of game World of Warships is going to be. It was going to be something closer to Eve, where long end game grinding determined more what you had than, say, your ability to play really well. Like you've played 1,500 battles, but you're like a super unicom because you get this game. It was going to sort of neutralize some of that. Community said no. Wargaming dropped it. And were you not a Wargaming employee during that time? And if so, can you take us to the inside of what happened with NTC?
Yeah, so I was. That was late last year, I think. It was first announced the first details were announced as part of the CC Summit 2019. That was actually the first time I saw detailed information about it. While I was aware they were working on essentially what is a Paragon system in terms of a prestige, or you regrind the content sort of system. I was aware they were working on it. I wasn't aware of kind of the details and the bits and pieces on it. And honestly, that was not a fun time to be a community manager for the game, because naturally a lot of people were upset. And part of it came from, I could completely understand why. Coming from playing a lot of free-to-play games that did kind of turn a little bit pay to win, and this could be, it could be seen as pay to win in terms of you could pay to convert your XP so you can regrind the lines faster and get the buffs. If you kind of really want to kind of look deeply at that kind of perspective.
Sure.
But unfortunately, we really weren't given anything. From a community manager standpoint, we were told, just keep gathering the feedback on it. Let us know what you're hearing out there. Let us know if you see anything kind of crazy, and we'll get back to you. And I think it was in the space of a week at most. I think it was closer to 4 days or something from when that was first kind of hit into the public view, that the development team turned around and changed their mind and said they were going to go back with the drawing board for it. It would still be kind of regrinding, but they were going to kind of change what the reward was for that. And essentially, as a community manager, we had to sit on our hands, take the feedback, and deploy the messaging we had, and just kind of wait and see what came down. It was a very rough couple of weeks.
Do you think that the response, or do you think that Wargaming's decision was made by somebody high enough on the decision tree, or high enough in the hierarchy, saying, yeah, this really isn't a great idea, let's do something else? Or were they all like, oh, this is a great idea, and suddenly they open up the door and there's this mob waiting? Do you think that the community actually, how much impact do you think the community response was in getting that thing canned?
The community response was definitely a big part of it. Obviously, if you've got a load of people yelling smoke, 9 times out of 10 there's a fire. There can be a fire without people yelling smoke, but the giveaway is the giveaway. So the community were definitely instrumental in kind of forcing the developers to go back and have a second look at the concept. But ultimately, it was the developer's choice to either go ahead with it or to pull it back. And I think in this scenario, they definitely did the right thing in terms of pulling it back and adjusting what the rewards were. Because ultimately, like, I don't hate a regrind system. I just think the rewards in that case were wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was like the when the Goulier Césaire was talked about getting debuffed because it was overpowered. We put forward a plan. The developers put forward a plan, a concept. The community, absolutely threw up their arms and said, "No, we don't want this. We don't want this." That made the developers go back and look at it. Take that community feedback, and then ultimately the decision was made, overpowered premium, or determined overpowered premium ships would not be touched. It's just unlikely they'll be sold again. They'll remain discontinued. It was another instance of the fact that Wargaming does listen to the community if there is enough people yelling smoke.
That's in some ways a good, but it's also kind of disheartening. But I guess that's just the way it has to be, is that if you want something done or something changed, they have to raise the temperature enough to get
it's hit or miss. There has been situations where things have been considered internally where they've got to a certain point and they've gone, oh, you know what, maybe not. Obviously for NDA purposes, I can't give examples of that. But there has been situations that staff have put stops to things. Trust me, we've had to rename certain things that would have come out very incorrectly had they gone through the way that they had. But sometimes the staff catch it and can prevent it before it goes out to the community. But the community ultimately is the last line of defense if something really, shouldn't go ahead.
Well, the smoke, there's smoke and fire. You've used the metaphor, but the real fire is people stopping spending money and stop playing the games. But usually by the time that fire hits, it's too late. So I guess the smoke, let's make another metaphor here. The canary in the coal mine is usually community complaining, but is there any, does it have to reach a certain temperature
Threshold?
or a certain threshold for them to like hit that pause button, or is it just...
No. One well put together concern, argument, etc. can do it. Good example of that was that feedback that I can't remember the dude's name, but he wrote a quite a large document on submarines that made it to the developers, and that was enough for them to go, okay, hold on, we need to go look at some things.
Okay, yeah, well that makes sense. So here's another question for you, and this is kind of, Wargaming has to know their players pretty well. I mean, it's their business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say they have, they want people to play the game because it's fun, but I noticed that they seem to incentivize, and people seem to go along with, maybe playing the game not because it's fun, but because of other reasons. This is a psychological thing, and it really baffles me. There was a very high-powered, very desirable ship, the Benham.
Yes.
And you could only get that ship by playing a certain game mode, like a lot. And I'll be honest, I kind of enjoyed the game mode the first 10 or 15 times I played it. Cool, right? A lot of fun. It was very different. And you talked about this on your stream, by the way. Is they should have, sporadic, let's say weekend-driven fun modes like the April Fool's, Halloween stuff. But the amount of grinding it took to actually get the Benham, and I hear this a lot, and it kind of troubles me, and I don't know how Wargaming approaches this psychology, but they're like, people are saying, oh, I have to grind this to get this ship. Well, why are you trying to get the ship just so you can play the game? But you're playing the game so why is it hard? Why are they grinding away at something or describing it as a grind to get a ship so they can just play the same game more? And it seems like does Wargaming know that sometimes they set up a mission that's really grindy, but the only reason people are playing it isn't because they're necessarily having fun, but to get some rewards, is to get them to do it. They create a big reward rather than creating something that's truly fun and dynamic. Because you can make people play anything if you put like a fantastic ship as the reward, right?
I mean, in the same breath, anyone can do any job if, it gets paid really well. Doesn't mean they necessarily like it. Ultimately, in those situations, yes, Wargaming is aware that they do put valuable rewards behind, the not the easiest tasks, because it is meant to be that, a reward, and it's meant to be valuable for the player. Do they get kind of the quote unquote formula right every time? No, I mean, Puerto Rico's a great example of that. But ultimately, it's down to the player to decide, is the reward worth what I have to do to get it? If the Benham is like, I really like the Benham. I think I grinded it out. I don't remember. I have it. I don't remember if I grinded it out or I got it for promotional purposes. Either way, there has been other ships where it's like, is this worth me putting the effort in to grind it out? If not, then I'm not going to do it. It comes down to, that opportunity cost. For me, like the Odin in the dockyard at the moment, I'm not actively trying super hard to do it. It's a case of, I'll see how far I get along by the time that the dockyard's due to get out, and I'll make that call whether it's worth putting in the doubloons extra to get it. But to me, focusing heavily on those missions versus, playing how I normally would, the reward to me in this scenario just isn't worth it because it's just not interesting to me.
Right.
And that comes down to players. I mean, the thing with the Benham, it has been said multiple times, and I can say it again because I said it multiple times as an employee. It is eventually going to come back as a ship that's available for another means, whether that be currency, another sort of event. I don't know, but it is due to come back for by some means at some point.
Well, yeah, and I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, though, is that there's grinds that are fun, and then there's grinds that are just pure seat time grinds. And I do like the direction I think that I've seen that I like is about the Odin, is that there's two ways to gain many of the credits or whatever this currency is to get the Odin. Some of them are just straight up grindies, but others are like get a Kraken or something like really skill driven, which in pursuit of that is actually I would consider to be fun rather than something anybody could get if they just sat in the chair long enough and clicked the mouse button.
Yeah, but I mean, when it comes down to what is fun and what isn't fun, fun is a very subjective thing. Like some people would have pretty much loved Rogue Wave and kept playing it, which was the event for Benham, versus like the latest Halloween, the Collecting the Filth. I love that event. I played it quite extensively. Other people were like, "No, I don't enjoy this event. It's stupid to me." And so fun is very subjective, and unfortunately, you've got to offer something for everyone and try different ways about going for it.
So this is going to be my last wargaming focused question before we take a break and come back with a very fun, lighthearted segment. Um, and this is actually something you touched on your stream too, is that you were kind of responsible in some ways for organizing the third-party run events. I think one that everyone seems to have forgotten is Oil Wars, which was fantastic. I don't know who put that together, but it was so good they put it into the game, such as naval battles. It seems like wargaming has a hot and cold attitude about investing in player-run events. They've invested very heavily in King of the Seas, such that they have an in-game collection for King of the Seas, which is, I think, fantastic and crazy. An in-game emblem, and not just a wargaming like a patch, but a progressive emblem. So the more battles you win in King of the Seas, the better emblem you get. It's super exclusive, very desirable. They have although they pulled it for some reason, I don't know why. They had a COTS camo, which is gorgeous, great bonuses, But then kind of no go on Shipstorm, and it seems our clan is interested in sponsoring a end of clan battle tournament where we're going to get the champions from each of the 4 servers together for some exhibition games just for fun, and I'm sort of wondering what is Wargaming's attitude. And again, they were very supportive of Oil Wars when that first came out. I don't know if you remember that, but why don't you talk us through what their mindset is on those types of events.
So yeah, Oil Wars, I'm not quite sure what that one was. That may have been before my time, or I maybe know it as something else, but not familiar with it. When it comes to player-run events or large-scale community events, it comes back to, what is needed to support this, and is it something that can be either abused by the player base, or is it something that is already in the game as standard? So things like Shipstorm. Shipstorm kind of formatting was very, very similar to that of what the Clan Brawl events ended up being like. And also, to a certain degree, what Clan Battles itself looks like. That is why those events or Shipstorm, at least last time I checked, wasn't looking, or last time when I was still there, was said, wasn't interested in progressing with further. They also have to be very mindful of clans farming events. So, particularly with King of the Sea giving out large prizes, clan battles and clan brawls also giving out prizes, we need another tournament that's going to reward, say, the same 4 clans that are already running these other 4 events. And that was where essentially Shipstorm kind of ran into a bit of a hiccup. There was another event as part of NA last year, which was Fight for the Flagship.
Yes.
That was a player-run event. The difference with Flight for the Flagship is that it did actually exclude, if I'm not getting my wires crossed, it did actually exclude the top 8 clans that had recently won previous events, which actually opened up the prize pool for a wider group of players that typically haven't seen rewards under these systems before. So it comes down to, what is the purpose of the event? What is the prize pool wanting to be, and what sort of, who are we expecting to win it? We want to make sure that, they wanted to make sure that they do have tournaments and events that aren't just catering to the same X amount of clans time and time again. When it comes to other community-based events, and I'll just say this generally, like if you are looking to set up, like it doesn't even have to be a clan versus thing, but if someone wanted to, for example, like the bounty events, which is probably what I think you're actually referring to, because I used to organize those for the team. If you're putting together pitches like that, Wargaming is definitely interested in hearing them. Take them to your community manager for your various server, Chrysanthos, Happer, Calvoth, whoever they may be. Unfortunately, I don't know the APEC and the Russian community managers off the top of my head, and pitch them your ideas, because they definitely are interested in listening to them and hearing them and seeing if there is a way for them to support them. But just make sure they are unique from anything that is already established in game.
Sure. And we're still in the planning phase. We were actually trying to do it last season where we got the winners of each server's clan battle season to do expositions that I don't want a prize pool. I just need the press accounts on a common server to get all these guys together.
So stuff like that, I mean, community managers are usually pretty happy to help out with, as long as you make it clear kind of what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to promote it, sort of stuff. They'll usually help out.
Okay, well, look, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and play Sink a Ship with our guest, Femennenly. And yes, we're going to get some questions from Storm, who's been sitting so quietly and patiently for us. And we are back with my guest co-host, the Storm, and the lovely Femennenly. We're very happy to have with us. So usually Bogsy does this segment, and he does his own introduction, but I'm going to do mine with a little bit of role-playing. Do you like role-playing, Fem?
I feel like that is a trap question, and I am not going to answer it.
Well, okay, so here, it's sort of like Dungeons & Dragons, but instead of a dungeon, we are in Kiev, Russia, where Leicester Studios are, correct?
No, St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg, okay. We're in St. Petersburg, frigid night in winter. There's snow, 6 feet, 2 meters of snow everywhere, and we're sneaking through cutting our way through the gate outside Leicester Studios, and you still have your employee key card, which for some reason miraculously opens the front door. The guards up front are all there's vodka bottles everywhere. They're all passed out because it's a big Russian holiday for drinking, known as Tuesday. We navigate past them down the hallway into the basement and through the sanctum sanctorum of Leicester, and we get to Sub Octavian's computer and the big mainframe, and there we have direct, unfiltered access to the spreadsheet. And you now have the option of deleting from that spreadsheet, the grand spreadsheet, any ship from the game you want. It's gone, like it never existed. All the models, everything is pulled out immediately, and it will never return. Ooh. What ship are you going to pull out of that spreadsheet?
Jeez. That's not an easy one. It's got the RTS CV player in me wants to say the kid because I freaking hated dealing with that shit back in the day. But nowadays, I feel like it needs to be one of the rapid fire DDs.
Hey, the reason for removing those is entirely up to you, though. It can be we've had people remove ships because of spite, because they think it hurts the game's balance, or because they just hate playing it, or they hate playing against it. So the motivation is...
You know what? Get rid of the Yamato.
Wow. Why?
Just get rid of that one.
Why?
That or the Fuso. Fuso to piss off Kami Samurai, but for the Yamato, because I'm so sick of people just sitting nose in. And people have started playing this reverse Yamato where they back into places, and then it just doesn't make sense. Like, be a man, grow some balls, get in a ship that can actually move in, and stop sitting on, like, the 110 A and J line.
That I don't think we've ever had that ship selected before, but I don't think you've ever had that kind of reasoning. You have any idea how many 70-year-old guys in the community center who log into World of Warships to sit in the back line and fire their Yamato guns are going to be heartbroken by your decision?
Well,
they should.
They can go get the new Sashi then.
There you go. There you go. All right. Storm, take it over.
All right, so Fem, with being a community contributor, I'm sure you're part of the Anchors Away tour last year in 2019, and I was wondering, or I guess for all of the people that don't know what the Anchors Away tour was, can you kind of describe the overall thought process behind throwing that, and how many ships did you visit yourself, and which one was your favorite?
Yeah, so the Anchors Away tour was a player gathering tour that took place from The first event was technically not even branded as an Anchors Away. It was a test event. It was at the USS Texas in March 2000 and last year, 2019. The idea was we wanted to be able to bring the community together. In the past, we tried to do conventions such as the PAX events, TwitchCon, but a lot of people didn't go out to them because they weren't interested in like the wider scale, and they're more interested in the history aspect, such was what was common on the Let's Battle tours. But the thing about the Let's Battle tours is they were big grand events, they were super expensive, and there was a lot of kind of just extra with them that really wasn't needed. So the Anchors Away tour was always designed to be kind of an opportunity for the players to get together in big groups and go check out a ship and just have some fun. We are extremely lucky here in the US and even our friends in Canada to have so many of historic vessels that are preserved and made museums that it just made sense to go around to the various locations. We managed to hit East Coast, West Coast, South Coast, and even Canada to hang out with our players. In all, we went to, I got the list over there. We went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Went to 13 different locations across the United States and up in Canada for the Haida. From those 13 locations, I went to every single event except for one. It was a very, very exhausting year. We sold out, I think, most of the events, minus a few here and there. All in all, it was over 3,500 players, I think, from the 13 plus locations that we actually managed to meet up and hang out. But a lot of it was honestly just getting together and being able to shoot the ship, with other commanders. People just being able to go up to anyone wearing an Anchors Away t-shirt and be like, "So what's your favorite ship in the game? What's your favorite map?" And just being able to meet members of the community was such a great privilege and really fostered an even greater sense of community. I know this year they were meant to do the second year of the Anchors Away tour with even more locations. Unfortunately, due to obviously the pandemic, a lot of those have now been indefinitely postponed. But hopefully they'll be able to bring it back in the future. But as the community coordinator, my job was essentially, being there to interact with the players. Anyone on those events, I was the one with the bullhorn, kind of directing people, welcoming people, doing the giveaways, doing the raffles, doing trivia, those sorts of things, and just making sure that everyone was having a good time.
A quick question. As bands go on tours, they tend to attract groupies who just follow them around. Did you have any groupies on the tour?
We definitely had a few players that made it to multiple events. I think we had one gentleman who is no kidding about at 6 or 7 of the 13 locations. And they were not like all just the like East Coast locations, all just the West Coast locations. 7 or 8 locations, both East Coast, West Coast combined.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, I personally went to 2 of them as at the USS Iowa. I had to go there since I'm from Iowa. And the USS Kidd, since we were visiting New Orleans, my family and I, at the time.
Oh, nice.
It was,
Mardi Gras,
it
yo.
was really cool being there, but I'm curious on which one was personally your favorite, where were you ever able to just relax at one of these events, or were you always going at 100?
Unfortunately, I was pretty much going at 100 in most of the events. Typically speaking, I did a lot of the on-site organization, so making sure we had the flyers for people, making sure we had all of the items for the giveaway from a few days before the event back at the office until pretty much the evening after the event. I had a lot of bits and pieces going on. My favorite events, though, I would have to say the smaller ships were always a lot more fun just because there wasn't quite as many people and the ships weren't quite as big, so it was easy to keep people together. For that reason, I really liked the Haida up in Hamilton was really fun. Turner Joy and Kid, I think Kid for me will always hold kind of a special place in my heart. The Kid was nice because unlike most of the previous events, I was just on social media duty, which meant I got to run around taking videos and photos of people. that, and it was my last event, so kind of got a little emotional there at the end of that event. But a lot of the Destroyer events would probably be my favorite. But honestly, the only event I didn't like was the one I got extremely sunburnt on, which was the Massachusetts. I still have the tan line a year and a bit later from that particular event.
Oof.
Oh,
Yeah.
must have been a serious burn.
Oh,
Well,
it was.
As being the community coordinator, I'm sure you're in close contact with a lot of the community contributors. How often did you meet face to face with these contributors, and how did you get along with them? Did you get close with any of them? You have a new best friend, or can you explain on that?
Yeah, so as part of my responsibilities, the community contributor program for the North America side was definitely under my jurisdiction. When it came to meeting the CCs, we did have CC Summit, which we took 5 CCs to Russia in mid last year, just after mid last year. Don't quite remember the exact time frame. But besides that, we didn't really have regular meetups in person. I did meet a lot of them over the year at the various Anchors Away events, just because they happened to be there. And I did also see a lot of them at various gaming conventions, such as TwitchCon and the various PAX events. Um, the NA group that I had under me, we were actually really quite close. There was about 25 to 30 CCs for North America during that time. And honestly, we had such a diverse group in terms of skill levels, specialization in terms of what they like to play ships wise, gameplay style, more serious, more casual, kind of hanging out, not hanging out. Um, in that group, there really wasn't anyone I disliked. There was such a great group of people for just all different sorts of reasons. Do I have a best friend coming out of that group? Probably Ashley, aka Ashley, who was the one of our other female CCs. We didn't have very many. Venesaria was the other one. But her and I got really close. She was one of the very first CCs I brought into the program, and we just have a lot in common. So we've been kind of keeping in contact since then. But honestly, really great group of CCs. And unfortunately, some of them have left since I left managing the program and working for North America. But it's interesting to still watch their content, and I still talk to a lot of them on a very regular basis.
It's awesome. Well, as my last question, I'd like to ask you, what was your favorite memory as an employee of Wargaming? Was
Oh,
it a trip or just meeting people every day?
honestly, I think it was just our basic office shenanigans. There was just like really obscure situations that would happen, like back when Radar X was part of a team. Tragic Loss and I absolutely terrorizing him by singing "Country Roads, Take Me Home" all the time when the West Virginia came out. Um, Tragic Loss scaring me with a tissue box on stream multiple times. Um,
Or how does that
Cabby,
work? How does that work?
she'd kind of just sneak up behind me with it, and it would catch me in the corner of my eye, and it would just kind of startle me. It was strange. Kami Samurai, when I started at the office, he started a week or so prior to me. We really didn't like each other, but as we started working closer together and whatnot, like we're really good friends now, to the point that it got to the point where he would feed me snacks in the office when I was hungry. There was this really funny memory. It was the very first Anchors Away tour where we didn't quite understand what working out the swag bags would look like, which ended up, we took 4.5 suitcases filled with everything. And the night before the event, we were in my hotel room and we were packing all of the swag bags for everyone. And then it ended up us having massive mounds of swag bags in my hotel room, and then realizing, crap, how are we going to get these to the ship? So Karmatica and I running around looking, we went to the front desk to try and find, hey, do you have some garbage bags or something? They gave us like 2. And then we kind of stole more off the housekeeper trolley, and we were running it. Yeah. It's just like a load of kind of funny, obscure memories that were just really fun and really, very memorable. And, I made really good friends for life from Radar X, Kami Samurai, and Karmatica, just with those great memories.
That's awesome. I'll throw it back to you, Simpex.
So going back down memory lane, we're going to go even further. Before you were with Wargaming, you were a community contributor, and I think even outside of that, you were creating videos how to play carry. In fact, I don't know how many hours the entire series was, but you made some massive encyclopedic instructional video series on how to play CVs and the level of depth and detail. It was almost, I felt like I should have gotten college credit having gone through them. And I can't imagine this could have been a PhD thesis for you. And we all, as great as those words, unfortunately, well, the reality is they actually probably do have some utility. So on the Chinese server, where I think they still have RTSCV, is that correct?
Unfortunately, no. I was actually planning on going and reliving some RTS experience a few weeks ago, and I had installed it, and I planned to play the weekend after, and that's when they patched the China server finally, and I was like, no. But yeah, no, before I started with Wargaming, I originally started playing Warships back November 2015, just after release. Was a bit of a pleb for a long time. Eventually, I got into Super Test, and was a Super Tester for several months. Through Super Test is when I kind of started my Twitch channel. I started streaming, mostly playing CV content because that's what I enjoyed most. From there, the old NA community manager, Super Nico Power, recognized me and was like, hey, we need some help. We've got some premium CVs coming out. Would you like to cover them as kind of like a guest spot CC? And I was like, sure, why not? So I did that for there a little bit. And then eventually, as I continued to make CC content, as I continued to make CV content in my how-to tutorials, which were, how to manual drop, how to overpass your torpedo drops, basics of positioning for CVs, that sort of stuff. I became more recognized in the community, and they decided to make me a full-fledged CC, since I was doing so much for the CV community. And then it was CC Summit 2018, which is when I met Radar X, and he and I talked at length about this, that, and the other. And he was really impressed with kind of the way I communicated and a load of other bits and pieces. And he was looking for someone to work with the CCs to also work on their streaming program from North America. And he thought I was a great fit. And then, yeah, the rest is kind of history. And I was employed by Wargaming.
It breaks my heart, though, to know that they took away RTS for the Chinese server. I mean, because it's been there for so long. Was there much of a rebellion over there when they made the change, or I don't know what the relationship is with
recently.
Those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, that was only recently. I don't think I've seen anything particularly. So I can't really say.
It's so sad to see a game or a game mode that just. And I remember you talked quite about it on stream and in other times how traumatic it was when they took away the RTS CV, but we'll always have the memories. So, Clan Battle Season 10. Your beloved ship, the Perth, because if our guests haven't picked up on it yet, you have some connection to Australia, don't you, or am I mistaken?
Just a little bit, yes. I'm originally, I was born in England, but I spent majority of my childhood from when I was like 2 to 18 in Australia. So a little bit of Aussie pride there.
So you have a casual clan, and have you gotten to bring your Perth into clan battles yet?
Not yet. My clan is very, very casual in terms of it's a holding place for anyone who wants somewhere to be in a clan, who may not be the most active, isn't super worried about competitive, but unfortunately, since we're pretty evenly split between North America and EU, we haven't quite organized it yet. Particularly with me being working full time for another gaming company, I just don't quite have enough time at the moment to organize it. Although, given Tier 6 is my favorite tier nowadays, I would love to get that up and running.
Well, if you're looking for a clan to play Tier 6 clan battles with, maybe I know of one, but we'll talk about that off air. So, look, I see you're back up to streaming. You've got, you're in your post wargaming phase. I feel like there should be like a Facebook group or a Discord for former wargaming employees to kind of gather and shoot the breeze, right?
There is quite a few of them from the NA office at this point, yeah.
Well, but what's next for you? Are you going to keep streaming, building the audience, playing warships? What's ahead of Femennenly?
It's really hard to say at the moment. I definitely don't love World of Warships as much as what I used to. And I think that just comes from, working 40, 50, 60 hours a week for the best part of almost 2 years. You do get burnt out on things. I think for the time being, like I play it when I'm feeling it, and if I'm not, then I just don't. I don't put myself under too much pressure to kind of keep up with things. I'm playing very much for my enjoyment and to hang out with my stream. Streaming is definitely still a thing. It's a pastime I enjoy, but it's not something I'm not. I don't have a partner push or push for a particular goal. I stream because it's fun and I like hanging out with people. But beyond that, I'm doing really well professionally with my newer job, and I'm just kind of looking to keep proceeding in that way. Thinking about maybe heading back to school and work on a new degree or something. But right now it's just kind of enjoying where life is, having a lot of free time with COVID and being stuck indoors with the cats. But yeah, the stream is going to continue on. No plans for YouTube content at the moment because I just don't enjoy making it as much. And yeah, just kind of see where the ships go, and maybe one day I'll branch out from that. But if not, then I'll just keep playing casually.
It's funny listening to you talk because uh, when you've climbed to the top of the mountain and you kind of been there and around, you kind of like, oh, that's cool. I'm just moving on. But I know there are people listening, and maybe you might have been one of them someday who's probably on that Twitch stream playing this game at the very bottom of the list with that one viewer. It's probably themselves opened up on a laptop, next to them, or maybe the two because they have their cell phone open too. So that's their two viewers. They're at the bottom of a very long list of streamers, and they're hearing you describe your journey of going from starting off as kind of a streamer, a content creator, um, going, gaining an audience, growing, becoming influential, having a massive, you do have one of the larger followings, enthusiastic, rancorous group of people on your Discord and on your Twitch stream, eventually, breaking in, getting hired by the gaming company of the company of the game you're streaming, traveling all over the place, and then moving past it. That's for many people listening, that's the dream. So what do you have to say to that one guy or gal sitting there at the bottom of the Twitch list with the two viewers who are basically him and his cell phone, who's thinking, gosh, you really, man, I'd do anything to be in your shoes. What kind of encouragement or maybe advice would you give to that person?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to kind of be realistic with where you're at and work on the things that you can change. So if you're a new streamer, you're not going to get viewers overnight, and that's okay. It does take time. Be realistic with it. A big part of growing on Twitch is what you can do with networking with other influencers. Now, that doesn't mean, going into Flamu's chat and being like, hey guys, come watch my stream. But that could mean, jumping into someone with maybe a viewership of around 20 to 30 and interacting with their community and engaging with them without the ideal to self-promote. For me, when I started out, a lot of people would come into my stream and be like, oh, I know you. You were the person who was chatting in Cammy's chat or in Derek's chat or in, other streamer X's chat sort of thing. And recognize me that way, and building yourself kind of that awareness of who you are and what your branding is really important. If you're looking to break into like a more professional thing for video games, whether that be community management or something else, you need to realize and remember that community management is not just about playing the game or just talking to people. That is definitely part of it, but being able to have clear communication, be able to keep your cool, be willing to explain that the mercy rule isn't it can't be fixed as easily as what you guys think it can be fixed over and over again is really important. Having diversity in skill, can you do social media? Can you work out how to run an event to it? Can you work out how to organize and pick out swag? There's a lot more to different functions within the gaming industry than a lot of people put, and a lot of people think it's just you're sitting there, you're talking about this, that, or the other. But staying informed about what you're passionate about is really important, and being willing to diversify your skill set and advance your skill set is also really important.
So that is. I hope that we have quite a few listeners who, again, they think you just basically won the golden ticket from Willy Wonka, and you're like, it was a good time. It's fine. I'm moving on with my life now. It's just, but I think that was some phenomenal advice you just shared, and honestly, I mean, everybody has a strategy on how to get ahead, but this is somebody who's actually done it. So please heed her words if you have aspirations. One thing you do as a streamer, which I think is pretty cool, is you actually plug a cause other than yourself, which is St. Jude's Hospital. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so St. Jude Children's Hospital is a cancer-focused hospital out of Memphis, Tennessee, that is completely not for profit, and they treat the worst cases of cancer for child and their family. The best part about St. Jude is they never charge the family for any care that their child receives, and they also cover other necessities such as housing for the parents, checkup care for the siblings, flights to and from Memphis as they need them. Um, St. Jude Children's Hospital, it also any research they're predominantly also a research hospital. Any research or any discoveries that they make, they share freely with all other hospitals around the world. It doesn't matter, what country you're from, what your nationality is, what your creed, race, etc. If your child is sick and they need help, St. Jude will help at no charge to the family. So every May we do a big campaign. Myself and my stream team, Aim and Achieve, we do a big campaign where we raise funds towards St. Jude. This year we did over 20,000. Last year we did just shy of 20,000. But it's a cause that no family should have to watch their child suffer through childhood cancer. So that's how I give back once a year. We also do usually a smaller campaign for another charity in November timeframe. But yeah, that's kind of a big and really important thing that me and my community do each year.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad that you're stepping up and giving back. So with that, I think I'm gonna wrap things up with some plugs. Down below, you will see a link to Fem's Discord server, her Twitter, and her Twitch stream. Please join, follow, like, subscribe. And as well, you will have the link to Bogsy's stream, the link to the North American Clan Discord as always, and our email address if you have any questions or suggestions for the show, thenewguyswows at gmail. I want to thank you very much for joining us today, Fem. And I want to also thank Storm for sitting in for Bogsy when he had to take off and deliver some poisons to the wonderful people of Los Angeles. So, but it was a real treat to have you, and we're really glad you're able to stop by.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, and for that's another episode in the can. We look forward to joining you all again soon. Please follow, subscribe to our podcast, give us good reviews, 5-star ratings on the Apple Store, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for tuning in.